Settler scholars' engagement with decolonizing teaching practices and centering Indigenous knowledges in Canadian higher education. The University of Calgary is located on the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, which includes the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The City of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Recognizing and lamenting the harms of settler colonialism, as a non-Indigenous settler Canadian, I seek ways to build new relationships with Indigenous people based on gratitude, respect, truth-telling, and justice. John is a sport history professor who was born and raised in Western Canada. He identifies as a white man and moved to the site of this study for his academic career. His experience of the faculty learning community on Indigenization was profoundly marked by a sweat lodge ceremony facilitated by a First Nations elder. John shares with me, "There's something that happened in my classroom that I don't think we've talked about yet that was really jarring for me. An Indigenous identifying student got pretty upset when I was teaching about colonization. This student and I had a great relationship, a lot of talking and interaction. They were a pleasure to have in my class. And then I was talking about colonialism. About 10 to 15 minutes in, they were visibly upset. They put up their hand and started talking. They got really mad because when I talked about what happened in the residential schools, I wasn't naming it cultural genocide. I was building towards that. I thought I was doing that in a purposeful way. And once I had built the examples up, I would say, and this is cultural genocide. It's methodologically destroying a culture through these practices. And sport was used in that process. Getting Indigenous students to play Western sports like hockey. That was what I thought I was doing. And the student was saying emphatically, it's cultural genocide. Like, hello? And I said, yes, it is. But in that moment, I could tell my approach was not working. I've had a chance to talk with the student about that experience a few times since. It's really made me think. I've come to realize that I'm teaching to people like me, and that doesn't always work when the student is Indigenous. I think I'm always trying to convince the white students to care about settler colonialism, and I'm sugarcoating it as a pedagogical strategy, doing this very Western approach to teaching, the framework that's familiar to me that I use to teach a range of subjects. It just didn't work for this student in this moment, and it was jarring for me. A lot has happened since the faculty learning community on Indigenization. I need to adapt what I'm doing. I rethought my curriculum after the faculty learning community, and I thought I was incorporating content that goes with the mission of Indigenization. But now I'm like, I need to rethink this again. I need to reframe this all again. Because who am I teaching to? Who feels comfortable in my class? How do I do this in a really meaningful way? I needed to figure out how to talk to everyone in my class. What does it mean to always, always, always be teaching to the Indigenous students in the room, never assuming that everybody is a settler, and also challenging my assumption that I need to talk to settlers and be nice to them? John's jarring classroom experience resonates for me. I respond to him. Thank you so much for that story. It really speaks to me and my own experience. As I've been doing this work for a long while, I thought that my audience was other settlers like myself. I told myself that I have nothing to teach Indigenous people because what could I possibly say to them that wouldn't be causing more harm or reproducing the same issues? I set my focus on a non-Indigenous settler audience. But the reality is I'm in relationship with Indigenous people, and they are going to read or encounter my work. They actually are a part of my audience. I need to be writing to them as well as to settlers. what a challenge this is to bridge that divide between those two audiences, because they have really different needs and really different epistemologies. I don't know how to do that in a classroom that is a mix of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students. It's a huge challenge. John agrees. It is a huge challenge, and it's a challenge that I'm going to look forward to. We all need to do better. We all need to do this differently. We all need to learn. My immediate reaction when that jarring classroom experience happened was to become defensive. Like, what I'm doing is coming from a good place, so therefore it's fine that you experience trauma in my class. John makes a cringing facial expression. I didn't say it that way, but that was certainly the undercurrent of what I was doing. Instead of saying to myself, I have to change. I have to rethink this. I have to not be so nice to settlers. But it's tough because I don't want to lose them. I don't want settlers to retrench themselves in anti-Indigenous racism and privilege. So how do I do this? It's an ongoing learning process. Reflective prompts. What disrupted or disturbed you as you were listening to John's story, A Jarring Classroom Experience? How can settler educators teach to all the students in their class, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous? What action is important for you to take to develop your decolonizing practices at this time? Thank you for joining me on this storying journey. If you would like to read more of John's stories in further detail and a more fulsome analysis of this study, please refer to the study entitled Towards Decolonizing and Indigenizing Teaching and Curricular Practices in Canadian Higher Education, a narrative inquiry into settler academics' experiences by Julie Mooney. That's me. This can be accessed at the University of Alberta's Educational Research Archives. I'll add the link in the YouTube comment below.